Everybody, it's Howard Chung.
I'm Paul Balzotti.
And welcome to another edition of Getting Real. And in this particular episode, this is such an important one because, Paul, you and I actually started out at the Anacortes office, right? We're in the other side of the room. It was dark. It was probably around the same time. And that was our first podcast. And we are ending the year 2023 and looking forward to 2024 with some major changes with the law in the state of Washington. And this is specifically regarding the buyer agency agreements, which are now mandatory according to the state. And so we just wanted to dive a little bit into this because this has been the talk for so many. But I will say this, that a lot of brokers, agents, they haven't really digested like what this really means in terms of like what does their process actually look like, what's actually going to change, because we don't want to get into too much of the nitty-gritty, which most brokers already know. Like technically you're not supposed to be paid, right, unless that agency agreement is in place, and you've got to actually show that agency agreement and get buyer acknowledgement when you first start the services, right? Mm-hmm. So this is in essence any kind of conversation, consultation. I mean, this is at the very beginning, but I mean, obviously you've been having training and a lot of conversations about it. So let's dive a little bit into that. But I think before we even talk about that, we got to talk about what's happening outside of the state of Washington.
Yeah.
There's all of these, lawsuits that have happened. I mean, for a lot of money here. We're talking, I mean, in the right? In the billions of dollars, right? I mean, that's just crazy at how much the demand, because obviously once one of those lawsuits, I mean, it goes, to the plaintiff's direction, you're going to see a lot more of those. And that's exactly what we've been seeing. But what conversations have you been having with your brokers?
Well, I mean, we're talking a lot about buyer consultations, which we're going to get into a little bit. But I think it's important to kind of take a step back in how disruptive this really has been to the industry, and if you're listening or watching and you're not in the real estate business, how much this really is such an important conversation that's going on with every firm, and we're definitely having multiple meetings talking about it, but also talking about just how we're moving forward, in a positive way. And but basically, at the national level, you have these lawsuits which stem from you had firms, and you had people that for the longest time a buyer's agent would say things like, it's free to work with me, it's free to work with me,
right?
And so you had that kind of practice, or you had listening, or agents would say, I'm not going to show a house unless it's pays me this much money or whatever. And so you just had some like bad apples and bad practices going on. And in a lot of parts of the country, the contracts, the disclosures were plainly just not, up to snuff, right? And the one really great thing that's going on in Washington State is we're a member of the Northwest MLS Service, which is a private member-owned MLS, not associated with the Realtor Association, which Realtor Association is fantastic. We're an advocate of the Realtor Association, but in other parts of the country, the lawsuits are realtor-owned MLSs. Our private MLS had a jump on a lot of, because those lawsuits are coming down in a major way now. They've been around for a while, and our MLS had already started creating new disclosures a long time ago. So about 2 years ago, we had a change where the selling office commission for the buyer's agent was public on the MLS. So you could see on Redfin, johnlscott.com, any of these websites, you could see the selling office commission, the buyer's agent commission.
Right.
Then 2 years ago, approximately year and a half ago, they changed where the first page of the purchase and sale, they put on there, this is the buyer's agent commission, this exact amount. And then the most recent thing was they changed the listing agreement, where it used to say, there's this percent that when you're selling your house, you're paying this percent, and you're splitting it between the buyer and seller. They changed that to say, listing agent, I'm the listing agent, I'm getting offered this commission. If you want to offer a buyer's agent commission, here's whatever percent you want down here. And oh, by the way, you don't have to have any percent to the buyer's agent. So there's already been in our MLS a rule where you could offer a 0% commission to the buyer's agents. So all of those things that have already happened with our MLS, in most parts of the country, none of those things had happened.
Right.
So we're literally 2 years ahead with all of these disclosures that we've been doing ahead of most of the country, which is why I believe our Realtor Association at a state level, why our MLS, why the local firms like John L. Scott haven't been directly in the fray of these lawsuits. It doesn't mean that they don't come our way, but that's definitely why we've been out of it so far. And then what's come next from it, our MLS is again taking it one step further to get even more ahead of the concerns, the complaints. And they're saying, okay, now you have to, as a buyer's agent, it's already public, the seller knows what they're paying, but we have to absolutely make sure that the buyer understands that they're truly the ones who are paying for this with a buyer service agreement, or a buyer's agency agreement, whatever term you want to use. And that's where we are now. So that's kind of like the groundwork of where we've been and now where we're going.
And just for clarity, when you say our MLS, we are talking, obviously, we are in Anacortes, Bellingham, most or a lot of Western Washington, right, is the NW or the Northwest MLS, which is what we're referring to, right? Obviously, other parts of the state are realtor MLSs. So we're referencing, when you said our, basically the NW MLS. So that's basically what's kind of happening. And, obviously our audience right now, they're mostly realtors, who we're speaking to. And one of the things that we just wanted to share is, because a lot of times we just don't like change. Who likes change? Yeah. But we know that, there's if you've been in the business for any period of time, there's been ongoing changes, over these past, 5 years. There's always changes with forms and, new disclosures and things of that nature. And there's modified, but this is a big one. This is a pretty significant one, mandated by the state once again, right? So if you're going to be, a licensed real estate agent or broker in the state of Washington, you now have to get the buyer agency agreement signed. And I think this change is kind of a big change in process, because so often we have gotten so used to, well, hey, it's nice to meet you. Yeah, so you inquired on this property. Let's go, let's go take a look at it. Or I meet you in front of the house, right? Or I'm at the open house and you're touring and we're engaging in good conversation. So many different methods. Even a referral, it's like, oh, hey, it's nice to meet you. So-and-so referred, you to me, and we're having this great conversation. And then I just start showing you property, and you like me and I like you. And next thing you know, we're signing a contract, and it's great. Yeah. But there was never that clarity, absolute clarity made in terms of how I get paid, right?
Yeah, well, and to be fair, there hasn't been for, what do we say, 80% of the sales, because we certainly do have agents already, and we've been training on it for a long time,
right,
who do what we would just call a buyer consultation before they ever meet with the buyer. They do a consultation. But to your point, most brokers don't do it. Some never have. Well, I'd say most have never done it, and many more have infrequently done it. And then and then the people who do buyer's agency, buyer consultations, there's even a smaller margin of them that do a really good job of doing it. I think I'm proud to say I think that a lot of the brokers that we work with, this change isn't a big deal for them, because they already were very clear on not only through all the things I mentioned that the contracts have already dictated as far as the disclosures. They've already, they have their process in their buyer consultation and all that they do every single time.
Right.
And I know for me and a lot of other brokers, they won't even show. They've been on the other extreme where they won't even show houses until they do that consultation. But again, back to your main primary point, that has not been the industry standard.
Right.
And so that is where everything gets flipped on its head right now.
I used to do a lot of training for John L. Scott. And so go way back to the year 2000.
Yeah.
Okay, so I joined John L. Scott officially in 2001, but starting in the year 2000, I started to already coach and train. I was at Century 21. That was my first real estate company. I learned, I was in Boston.
Did you wear a gold jacket?
You know what? The many people back then, I mean, so some people have no idea what your reference is in terms of the gold jacket, because it's been gone for so long. But way back in the day, there were the Century 21 gold jackets.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I did get a cashmere jacket. So it was brown, right? That being said, I never, but had, no association with the actual gold jacket with Century 21.
I want a picture of that with the Century 21.
But being a newbie back then, and I first got licensed in '95, and so when I first got licensed, I was with Century 21. They had this thing. It was called the 21 point pledge. And so every time I would meet a buyer, right, they were basically saying, hey, you've got to showcase your value proposition. Don't just start going and showing property. Explain exactly all these points that you're going to do to help the buyer, right? And a lot of it was, character-based, integrity, communication, the fact that I'm going to do what I say that I'm going to do. I mean, so there was this pledge. And so it was just my commitment is basically what it was.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, just want to let you know, these are all the things that you can expect from me if you and I decide to work, jointly together. This is my 21-point pledge to you. And then I would sign it. And it was not a contract, right? So there was no obligations or terms, or, it was not a buyer agency agreement by any means. It was just a pledge, 21 points. But there was something powerful behind me signing it, saying, this is my commitment to you. And then I would ask for your acknowledgement by you signing also. And this is back when there was something called carbon copies. And Paul, you're old enough to probably remember just barely remember what was called the triplicate form. So basically, right, it was these forms that you had to pay a lot of money for. And there were 3 copies, obviously. And so then I would sign, then you would sign the acknowledgement. And then, and it was basically just that show of like your acknowledgement, but my pledge. Now, I remember this one time, they wouldn't sign it. And they're like, no, I'm not going to sign that. I don't want to commit to you. And guess what? It was a mutual understanding. Like, I didn't spend that much time. I didn't show any property. But I was just like, it's better for us not to waste time with one another. Me spending a bunch of time with you if you're not going to commit. And so the no was fantastic. So I still remember that to this day. Now, when it came to John L. Scott, and I actually came to the Seattle area from Boston, nobody was using anything like this at all. So it was more foreign for me not to have some kind of acknowledgement or disclosure, because that was the first 3 years of my, my career was using a form like this. So then in the year 2000, in 2001, when I first joined John L. Scott, I was basically teaching the same thing. I created something similar for John L. Scott. But at that time, even we had a version of the buyer agency agreement. So after the buyer consultation, tucked right there, and most agents didn't want to do it, and there were agents back then. And so I said, just have the document there, right? Just so that you can say, listen, this is a buyer agency agreement. All this is saying is that, you understand and you're agreeing that if I show you these properties, that you're going to be, I'm your agent, basically, right? And here we are, like 20 years later. And it's finally just something that we have to put together. And honestly, I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I agree. I agree. I completely agree.
If I'm we obviously know if you're, the listing agent, listing broker, you're going to do a great listing presentation. Do the entire presentation, the CMA, the marketing package, the negotiations, you go through the entire thing, and then you got to get a contract signed. And that is the beginning of the process. And the state's saying, hey, shouldn't it be the same? The acknowledgements, the agreement, before working with a buyer. And that's basically what's happening right now. So I think the biggest thing that we've got to talk about, because the word value proposition is going around a lot, right? So we can have words like buyer agency agreement and value proposition and buyer consultations, but we've got to be really clear what all these things mean, how I go about it very tactically, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are just stuck right now. They're just nervous because it's like a bit foreign to them as far as how to put all the pieces together to that point of, okay, I just gave the buyer consultation. What does that segue look like after the consultation? and I slide that document in front of you or the DocuSign, I need you to sign this now.
Yeah, well, so we've also been talking about for over 20 years, all the good realtors, all the leading professionals are always been like, we want to raise the bar. We want to raise the bar.
Yeah.
We want to raise the bar. Well, what does raising the bar look like? This is what raising the bar looks like, really. I mean, like, we're now at the point now because if for people who are newer in the business or not in the business, there's a lot lower skill level brokers who can get more buyer deals going, partially because they don't need to, do as much value they don't need to sell themselves as much. They just need to kind of be there at the right place at the right time if they happen to help somebody buy or sell. But help somebody find a house. But when somebody goes to sell their house, they sit down with you and they're like, okay, what are you going to do for me? I got to pay all the fees. And there's a lot more sellers, therefore, who have been already interviewing several brokers before they choose who they're going to list with. There's been some of that with buyers, but we're certainly going to see a lot more of that when all of a sudden every buyer that's out looking is introduced to this concept like, oh, you need to sign the service agreement with me. A lot more buyers are going to sit there and go, well, wait, because they can sign a non-exclusive agreement. That's going to be one of the things, and just go show a house with you.
Right.
But there's definitely going to be more agents who are going to think twice before signing an exclusive and really ask more of those questions. So what that's going to do is it is going to filter out some of the brokers who are not willing to either communicate their value really well, or quite frankly don't have the skills and the communication level and the wherewithal and the education and the understanding of the market to really sell themselves as somebody that is worth what they're charging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, and you know what? That's okay, because there is brokers out there who quite frankly aren't providing good value to their buyers. And so if that's what's gonna come out of this, that the brokers who are doing the right things, that are with the firms that are providing the tools, that we're, like we're providing, if those brokers can then help more of the buyers, and I mean, if that's what's the term for that? I mean, essentially, it's just the industry essentially just shrinks a little bit, but you have a more quality pool of brokers essentially.
Absolutely. And what was great is right before our podcast started, one of our newest brokers sitting right here, and we're of course having the pre-talk, right? Yeah. And she was listening to us and saying, well, I don't know any better. So this is going to be my standard, entering into the business, representing my buyers. And I don't think I would want it any other way.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a great statement from a brand new broker who just is entering into the business. Like, I want to be the one to, of course, share my value proposition with my client and explain why they should choose me. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, wow, what a breath of fresh air, because, up to this point, for the last 6 months, it feels like we've just been talking about, oh man, how are we going to handle all this major transition? And yet for brand new people, they're going to potentially have an edge. So I think we almost have to have like that mindset back to like a brand new agent. Wait a minute, what is my value proposition? How am I, going to provide value to my client? And so, I mean, this is an acronym that we've used for so long, but it's a simple way to remember: RENT, R-E-N-T. And Paul, I don't know if you remember this, but it is the R stands for representation. Think about all the things that you're doing when you're representing a client, right? Because you've got, of course, like, oh, I'm representing you. So everything that I do and say, I mean, it's for your benefit. So the representation, there's so many, so much that goes into actual representation. The E stands for expertise. So I'm gonna do my research. I'm gonna know my numbers. I'm gonna know my stats. I'm gonna know how this particular community and the months of the months of inventory rates, how that's going to impact you. You can rely on me to have expertise that you don't have. So that's part of my value proposition, right? Mm-hmm. So representation, my expertise, my negotiation. And a lot of agents and brokers will say they're great negotiators, but they're just saying, oh, I'm a strong haggler. And haggling and negotiation is almost the opposite. Yeah. They basically think that haggling is the same thing as negotiation, but it's really not. So there's a whole much more in-depth, of course, strategies to negotiation, the art of negotiation, the art of asking the right questions and finding out more information, and the way to get more information, right? But your negotiation ability as a broker representing your client is so paramount. And finally, the transactional excellence, because any client who's ever done a deal where it's fallen through, whether you're a buyer or a seller, because of something during the transaction, a home inspection item or a mortgage issue or anything in underwriting or last minute, challenges, whatever it is. Of course, God forbid the whole escrow, fraud and things of that nature, but transactional excellence, that's the T. So the value to an agent or to a broker on the buyer side is the representation, expertise, negotiation, transactional excellence. And if I can articulate that value to my buyer, they're going to have so much peace of mind. And it's going to be a joy working together, and they're going to have no challenge when I represent or when I basically show you this agency agreement, how I'm paid, what exclusive versus non-exclusive means, right? All of that. It's not a big deal. In fact, it should just be like this obvious, thing that just moving forward, that's the new norm, it's the new standard. And so I just feel like we really need to embrace it, not fight it. I feel like some people are still fighting it or avoiding it, but we've got to embrace it.
Yeah, well, and it's so you brought up, and before we got on, I was talking about like on the education part. I think that some of the fear falls in that, a lot of realtors, again, they're not actually like, they can't turn around and actually articulate really well, here's what's going on with the market. They could say it's a great time to buy on Facebook, like, right. Oh, it's a great time to buy, yeah. Interest rates are down, like a little sales pitch, but that's not educating them on the different aspects of the market. And so what I love about the situation is I love the idea that, to be a broker and to be a great broker now, it's going to be even more paramount that you understand the market, that you can articulate the market really well, that you get good at those things. I mean, and then there's the people that have to just literally get better, or like you said, maybe they got to go. There's a designation called your CNE designation.
Yeah.
There's what's the book? Don't split the difference. There's
never split the difference.
Never
yes.
split the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot of skill building and educating that realtors are going to need to step up their game on, which is great.
Absolutely.
Like, we want this industry to be like, you've heard me say this so many times, but I watched my dad grow up in this business, and I thought it was the coolest thing, like the best business, because I'm watching my dad. He's going to work in a suit every day, and he looks like he's a big deal. And then I went to the real estate the class to get my license when I was 21. And at first I thought, I'm only 21, and I probably should just become an assistant or something for a little while, because this is really intimidating, all these big shot business people. I went to the class and I looked around and I was listening to the questions being asked, and everyone was like, yeah, I'm gonna try to do this part-time, and yeah, and I'm listening to everybody talk, and I'm looking around the room, I'm like, I think I could probably do this and like just right away and be fine. Like,
right.
It wasn't a very intimidating business actually to get in. My dad was actually a little bit I realized he was on the upper end of the echelon of the business. And so it's like, I would love to be, in an industry in 10 years where a 21-year-old comes in and doesn't think it's that easy. In fact, when somebody interviews with us, we don't try to make it sound easy.
Right.
We do everything under the sun to be the most resourceful and to help develop people to be the best version of themselves. But we're not trying to talk people into, there's just a whole other side of the industry that's been kind of gross, where it's like, they're putting out ads saying, getting in this career, $200,000, $300,000 a year, and they kind of literally sell people on the career, and then don't even properly educate them or train them once they get going. And then they're just kind of sink or swim, and a lot of them sink. That's why 80% are out in 2 years. And so if in 10 years we're in a business that, less people are getting into, the people are getting into just automatically have a completely different process before they even are flipping around and working with a buyer, that's better for everybody. And certainly it falls in our wheelhouse, because, we're a company that we haven't, run our sales that way, where we're like, the more people we can hire, the better. We've always cared about the quality of the broker, about somebody who wants to be full-time, a serious professional. And we've always been about resources, education, development, all those kind of things. And so attracting and not seeking and all that kind of stuff. So it benefits our firm, but more importantly, it benefits the industry and it benefits the consumer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, the new broker we're just talking about, because we're doing a video interview, right?
Yeah.
And because, everybody should be on video. But the final question that we asked her, even as a brand new agent, brand new broker, was why should somebody use you? Why should somebody work with you? And I think that is the challenge right now. Go ahead, have somebody ask you, just as a role play and practice, why should I use you as my real estate broker?
Yeah, or if they're a consumer, ask your agent that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so practice that, and really don't. And it's not just about like the quick fancy thing to say, right? Or that this is a great line. No, really, why should they use you? Think about it deeper, like philosophically, like what is my level of expertise?
Yeah.
Do I actually have that, or do I need to hone that deeper? Because I want to be myself, have the confidence that when a consumer works with me, a buyer works with me, they are really getting the best expert that's going to represent them, that's going to watch out for their behalf, right? These are all the things that I'm going to really be doing. Like, this is my pledge, back for you. And I think this is a good time for us to consider that.
Well, and so the next podcast we're going to do, we're going to kind of deep dive more into the buyer consultation, for sure, and some of the tools that John L. Scott offers. But what I also think is so fabulous about our industry is it's not, some people think, well, I'm not a great salesperson or this or that. And some of the best brokers are not great salespeople, traditional salespeople. You essentially, if you're a trustworthy professional person that is good relationally, and can communicate well, is relationally a word? I don't know if it is. Okay. So, you have all sorts of different personality types in this business.
Yeah.
And some of the things that are just so simple, about helping, helping get a client to agree to work with you and pay you what you're worth, none of it has to do with like a sales pitch. It's like asking good questions.
Yeah.
Having the education. You do have to have the education and the understanding of the market and be able to educate the consumer on the market. Maybe skill building on the negotiation side, but then like we've talked about already a couple times, you pointed out the 21-point pledge or whatever that is, simply literally taking the time to just go through those things. That's not a sales thing. That's literally that's also educating.
It is.
And it's just a little bit lazy, quite frankly, that we just haven't always took the time to do that. And now we're going to need to. And the great thing is John L. Scott already has fabulous tools and presentation materials for that. They're even updating more. So that's exciting too.
Yeah. If there's like one takeaway that I would recommend, right? Like, okay, for my expertise, for some of my skill building, the negotiation, definitely read the books, get your CNE, like consider that. Become really, really good friends with your mortgage person.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Because if you really think about it, when it comes to the buying process, especially as interest rates have risen, everybody needs so much more consultation regarding the mortgage, right? Yeah. The mortgage processes, the different products that are out there. Because the products that are available today are way more complex than a year, 2 years ago, when everything was obviously the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, right? So the buy down and the credits and the different options that are available, become really good friends with probably a couple of mortgage people, right? Because some are going to offer different ones. And so you definitely want to make sure that it's not just like always the introduction, because obviously, of course, you want to introduce to your mortgage person, but you want to be really knowledgeable when it comes to some of the programs that are available. Because I just hear so often, I didn't know I could do that. Oh, I didn't think about that, right? And so we do need to wear probably more hats than before. But that's part of your expertise. I think that's definitely an area that we could all probably just grow in some knowledge about. Things like the ADUs. One of our podcasts is talking about ADUs. Hey, if you buy a property, the value of the house is different when you actually have an ADU on it, or possibly two. What are rental rates for an ADU on the piece of property that you might buy, right? So that is a new, skill set, expertise. So the more you know about these kinds of different, more broader things, the more value you're going to bring to your buyer.
Well, and on that note, so, what we do at our offices is we are constantly having different loan officers and lenders come in, and they're our most common, most popular guest to our office meetings because of this point, because they're always introducing new products. They all have different products that they're good at. They're always going to give us a little education. They're going to give us an update on rates and what's going on with different terms and everything like that. But not only is it so important so that you understand the products out there to help your buyer in that consultation, but it's even so crucial just even in negotiations. You know, like if you as a realtor don't understand, what the different buy down options are, on how it'll affect your buyer for whether they have closing costs paid or whether they don't, if you can't give them direction, the loan officer is not there in the meeting usually when you're writing the offer.
That's right.
But they're directly involved in the product that's going to be, you're going to be underwriting. And so if you can't have a really fluid idea of exactly what products are available to your buyer and how that can help them, and how you can position the offer either for negotiation standpoint or for their best interest or vice versa, you're right, it's huge. And so, again, that falls into the same theme, but a really important one of just dialing everything up on your process and on your education.
So hey everybody, we want to thank you for joining us today. I mean, it's actually an exciting time. Whenever there's change, you know that there's opportunity. There's a way for you to kind of level up, is basically what it is. It's time to level up our game, our expertise, our articulation of that, and our processes. And so it is a great time. So with all these changes that are occurring, you're in the real estate business, we really definitely encourage you to partner up also with a company like us. So if you are looking for a change, or you are looking to join a firm, we are looking to partner with good people, the hearts of teachers and nurses, like big hearts, right, who really want to give to the community. Hey, come join us at John Scott Anacortes, and we are looking forward to talking to you again soon.
That's good.